At its core, this is a story of injustice, resilience, and redemption. It follows a black man falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit and the emotional, legal, and societal fallout that ensues. The story explores how systemic prejudice and assumptions can destroy lives, until the truth finally breaks through. It's about how easily the world turns its back on someone based on the color of their skin, and how powerful it is when that person refuses to give up, even when everyone else already has. The underlying core idea is redemption through truth and inner strength. The protagonist does not seek revenge, but rather justice. Justice for himself, and symbolically, for countless others who have been wrongfully accused and silenced. This story falls under the legal drama and social justice thriller genres. It draws on elements from courtroom dramas, but it also dives deeply into the psychological toll of being accused when you're innocent and no one will listen. The courtroom scenes provide intense suspense, while the personal flashbacks and inner thoughts of the protagonist create a deeply emotional narrative. The dominant emotion throughout the story is injustice-fueled tension, with an undertone of resilience and eventually triumph. The audience is meant to feel the heavy weight of being wrongly accused, the terror of watching your life unravel, and the slow burn of rage when no one believes you. But they're also meant to feel inspired as the truth emerges, piece by piece, culminating in a shocking revelation that vindicates the protagonist and exposes the real culprit. The emotional impact of the story is designed to be gut-wrenching, infuriating, and ultimately liberating. It asks the audience, what if this happened to you? And it forces them to confront how bias, silence, and complicity can shape, and sometimes shatter, lives. The chosen title immediately sparks curiosity and suspense. It raises urgent questions. Who was this man? Why was he accused? What truth shocked the court? The phrase, without proof, underscores the injustice, and the truth left the court stunned suggests a dramatic twist that turns everything upside down. It promises courtroom intensity, emotional depth, and social commentary, all in one. The gavel slammed. The courtroom held its breath. A single bead of sweat rolled down Darren Cole's temple as the prosecutor's voice echoed through the chamber like a war drum. He did it, the woman declared, pointing a painted fingernail across the room. He was the only one there, the only one who had reason. And the evidence, she held up a blurry security photo like it was a holy relic, places him at the scene. But Darren knew something that no one else seemed to care about. He didn't do it. His heart pounded against his ribcage like a prisoner desperate to escape. Handcuffed, seated, surrounded by white faces filled with judgment, he looked like the monster they wanted him to be. To the jury, to the press, even to the judge, he wasn't a man. He was a case file, a statistic, a body that fit the narrative. The victim was white. The defendant was not. That was enough for most people. He turned to his left, where his public defender sat, a young man who hadn't looked him in the eyes once. His tie was crooked, his folder empty, and his mouth dry. Darren could smell the fear on him. But it wasn't fear of the system. It was fear of defending the wrong man. Fear of losing the case. Not because it was unjust, but because it was unpopular. They said you were angry. The prosecutor continued. They said you threatened the manager just weeks before. You had motive. You had access. And when we looked at the footage, guess what? There you were. More gasps from the pews. Darren closed his eyes. He knew that footage. He'd been there. But not for the reason they claimed. He wasn't there to steal. He was there to beg. 3 weeks earlier, he'd gone to that same store looking for work. The manager, red-faced and smirking, had thrown his resume into the trash without a glance. Darren had asked why. The man whispered, "We don't hire your kind." But you don't tell the court that. Not without evidence. And evidence was the one thing Darren didn't have. The courtroom lights felt too bright, like interrogation lamps. He could feel every eye on him, feel them weighing his skin color like a guilty verdict. A soft murmur rippled through the room. Then a voice from the back. A quiet, trembling voice. That's not him. Every head turned. The judge banged the gavel again. Order. Order. But the voice came again, louder this time. That's not the man I saw that night. I never said it was him. The prosecutor's smile faltered. The gallery froze. Darren's eyes shot open. His breath hitched. Was someone finally telling the truth? And then silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that comes just before everything changes. His name was Darren Cole, 32 years old. Born in Atlanta, raised in the South Side. Single mother. No father. No safety net. Just his fists, his faith, and a name that the world never gave a fair shot. He wasn't a saint, but he was a good man. He'd done everything they told him to do. Kept his head down, stayed in school, avoided the streets. While other kids chased fast money and faster funerals, Darren clung to something quieter, hope. He loved books, not because someone told him to, but because they were a doorway. Toni Morrison, Baldwin, Ellison, he devoured them like scripture. They made him feel seen. He dreamed of teaching literature someday. That was the plan. He got into Morehouse on a scholarship, graduated with honors. But reality doesn't always honor the educated black man. When he applied for teaching jobs, the doors didn't open. When he tried to rent in better neighborhoods, the apartments just got taken. When he walked into interviews, the room tensed like a storm had entered. He worked retail, then security, then a warehouse. Each job paid less than the last. And when the pandemic hit, everything crumbled. He lost his job, his apartment, his mother to cancer, all within a year. He was tired. Tired of smiling to make others comfortable. Tired of pretending that his skin wasn't a weapon in their eyes. But even then, he didn't give up. He tried. God, he tried. He'd iron his shirt, rehearse polite answers, shave his beard to look clean. He'd hand in resume after resume. But no callbacks. No chances. Then came the grocery store. A job stocking shelves. He knew it wasn't much. But he was desperate. The manager, Mr. Kelton, looked at Darren's application and didn't even read it. He tossed it in the trash. Darren, stunned, asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Kelton smirked. "Don't play dumb. You people are always looking for handouts." Then he turned and walked away. Darren stood there, shaking, not because of what was said, but because of how normal it felt. Like this kind of humiliation had become a routine part of being black and unemployed. He left the store with his fists clenched and his jaw locked. He didn't yell, didn't cuss. He just walked out. But the security camera caught that moment. The glare on his face, the tension in his walk. And weeks later, when the store was broken into and money stolen from the safe, Kelton remembered one thing. The angry black man he dismissed. The one who dared to question him. He told the cops it had to be Darren. No proof. No fingerprints. No footage showing the crime. Just an old grudge and a blurry still of Darren walking out of the store weeks earlier. That was enough for an arrest. Enough for the system to move like a machine set in motion. Because once someone like Darren gets accused, the burden of proof flips. Suddenly, he had to prove his innocence. In jail, he read court papers by flickering fluorescent lights. He called the public defender's office 5 times a day. But his lawyer was overworked, underpaid, and barely knew his name. Inside, Darren's biggest fear wasn't prison. It was being forgotten. Being silenced. Being another headline no one questions. Man arrested in robbery, prior dispute revealed. He didn't sleep much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's face, soft, warm, and exhausted. She used to say, "Baby, the world ain't fair, but you gotta be." So Darren stayed fair. He didn't lash out. He waited. He believed, somewhere, somehow, truth had to matter. But truth moves slow. And lies, especially the convenient kind, move like wildfire. The day of the arraignment, as Darren stood in chains before the judge, he looked out at the courtroom and thought, will anyone see me as human today? He wasn't just fighting for freedom. He was fighting for something bigger. To be seen, not as a suspect, a silhouette, a threat, but as a man. And in that moment, when a trembling voice whispered, "That's not him," hope sparked again. Because for the first time since his arrest, someone, anyone, might be willing to tell the truth. The courtroom had been thick with silence, the kind that crackled like static between thunder. Darren stood there, shackled at the wrists and ankles, head held high but soul worn thin. The prosecutor's voice had just finished echoing off the walls. "We believe we have sufficient circumstantial evidence to move forward with trial." That's when it happened. A voice from the back. Soft, shaky, but loud enough to pierce the silence. "That's not him." Every head in the courtroom turned. Even the judge blinked, startled. From the last bench, a man stood. Mid-40s. Worn jacket. Nervous hands. He looked like someone who hadn't spoken up in years. "I was there that night," the man said, clearing his throat. "I saw the guy who broke into that store. and it wasn't him. The prosecutor immediately objected. Your Honor, this witness was not submitted to either party. But the judge, now wide-eyed, silenced the court with a raised palm. Approach the bench, she ordered. The next moments were chaos, whispers between attorneys, bailiffs moving toward the witness, the judge flipping through papers. Darren just stood there, frozen. Who was this man? He'd never seen him before. Not in his life. Your Honor, Darren's public defender stammered. I request that we hear this man out. If he has information that can exonerate my client. The judge leaned forward. I'll allow it for now, but proceed with caution. The man was sworn in, trembling slightly. He introduced himself, Earl Jennings, former janitor at the plaza across the street from the grocery store. I was doing overtime that night. Cleaning offices, he began. Took a smoke break around midnight. That's when I saw it. Saw what? The judge asked. The back door to the grocery store. It opened, and someone slipped inside, tall, light-skinned, maybe 5 feet 10 inches. I remember thinking he moved fast, like he knew the layout. Could you identify this person if you saw him again? Earl shook his head. He had a hood up. But I do remember something. A tattoo. Snake wrapped around a dagger, right forearm. I saw it when he reached up to pry the door open. The courtroom buzzed again. Darren didn't have a tattoo. Never had. Never would. The judge looked to the bailiff. Get the file. Mug shots. All former employees of the grocery store. See who fits that description. And just like that, Darren saw something he hadn't felt in weeks. Momentum. Later that day, when Darren sat in the holding cell, his public defender came in with eyes wider than before. We found someone, he said. A former employee. Worked stock at that grocery store. Fired for stealing. Fits the height. And, get this, he's got a tattoo that matches Earl's description. And he just skipped parole last month. Darren leaned back, exhaling slowly. He didn't cry. He didn't cheer. He just closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Mama." But it wasn't over yet. The DA's office didn't like to be embarrassed, especially not in public. So they fought. They said Earl's memory could be flawed. That maybe Darren had covered the tattoo. That maybe the whole thing was staged. But then came the second break. Security footage. From across the street. The janitor's building. Grainy, but clear enough to see the time stamp. And a figure matching the tattooed man slipping into the store at 12:04 a.m. Darren had an alibi. He'd been at a bus shelter 5 blocks away, waiting for the last 89 route, trying to get to his friend's couch for the night. And new footage from a city bus camera confirmed it. He'd been telling the truth all along. Days later, the charges were dropped. But the damage wasn't. He walked out of jail with a plastic bag holding his clothes, $27 in commissary credit, and a name still stained by accusation. As he stepped into the sunlight, reporters shouted questions. He ignored them. He was done performing, done explaining. But one camera caught a moment the others missed. Darren looking into the sky. Tears, not of weakness, but of release. As if the storm had passed, but left thunder in his bones. Later that night, he slept in his cousin's guest room. Clean sheets. Quiet walls. But he didn't sleep. Not really. Because he couldn't stop thinking. What if that man hadn't spoken up? What if the camera didn't work? What if his skin had been enough to seal his fate? The questions echoed. And that's when Darren made a decision. He wasn't just going to clear his name. He was going to change the game. Darren could have disappeared. No one would have blamed him. After all he'd been through, vanishing into a quiet job and a small apartment somewhere far away sounded almost heavenly. But Darren didn't want quiet. He wanted justice. Not just for himself, but for every black man who didn't have a stranger like Earl standing up for them. For every innocent person who sat behind bars because someone decided they fit the description. So he got to work. Step 1. Clean the slate. With the help of a pro bono attorney from a civil rights group, Darren filed a motion to have his arrest and charges expunged. He wanted every trace of the accusation wiped. Not buried. Not sealed. Gone. It took months. Petitions. Hearings. Even a reluctant signature from the same judge who'd presided over his initial appearance. But finally, it was done. Step 2. Flip the story. Darren agreed to a sit-down interview with a local black journalist, the only one who'd reached out to him with genuine empathy, not sensationalism. They met in a library conference room. Darren wore a simple sweater and spoke slowly, carefully. He didn't bash anyone, not even the cops who arrested him. But he told the truth. About the system. About the assumptions. about how many times he had to fight just to be heard. The article went viral. Its title read, "He was guilty until proven innocent. Now he's speaking for the silenced." Within a week, speaking invitations rolled in. Churches, universities, nonprofits that wanted Darren to share his story. But that wasn't enough. He wanted real change. So he started something bigger, the Jennings Project, named after the janitor who saved him with one brave sentence. The goal? Free legal aid and rapid response for wrongfully accused black men. Emergency funds for bail. Public advocacy for better training in law enforcement. Education programs in schools about knowing your rights. He teamed up with lawyers, social workers, community organizers. He wasn't rich, but he was driven. And that drew people in. He wasn't polished. He didn't wear a tie. But when Darren spoke, people listened. Because he spoke like a man who had nothing to prove and everything to give. One day he got a call. It was from the district attorney's office. A new DA. Young. Black. Reform-minded. She asked to meet. "I read your story," she said, when they sat down at a small coffee shop downtown. "And I think you're exactly the kind of person we need on our new civilian oversight board." Darren almost laughed. "I was nearly locked up by your office." She nodded. "Exactly. You know the cracks in the system. You felt them. We need that perspective if we're going to fix anything." It wasn't an apology. It was an invitation to create change from within. Darren said yes. And just like that, the man once shackled in a courtroom was now sitting across from prosecutors, reviewing cases, asking hard questions. Why was this arrest made without a warrant? Why did the officer omit this part of the footage? Is this truly enough to charge someone, or are we just trying to close the file? His voice began to carry weight, not because of any title, but because his experience couldn't be debated. He had lived the nightmare. Now he was helping dismantle the machine that built it. But not everyone was thrilled. Online trolls popped up. People who called him a race baiter, a grifter, said he was just milking his trauma. He ignored them. But one day, as he was walking home, a man in a suit approached him. Clean cut, white, late 50s. "You're Darren Holt, right?" Darren paused. "Yeah. Who's asking?" "I'm Judge Keller. Retired now. But I remember your case. I was watching from the gallery that day when Earl stood up. I wanted to say, I'm glad justice caught up. Eventually." Darren just stared. "Eventually doesn't help the people already buried by the system," he said. The judge nodded slowly. "You're right. But you're doing something powerful, son. Don't stop." And he didn't. He kept pushing. More lives saved. More names cleared. More cops held accountable. And one day, standing before a crowd at a city event, he was handed a plaque. "For courage in the face of injustice, Darren Holt." He looked at it for a long time, then raised it to the sky and said, "This isn't just for me. This is for every brother still waiting behind bars, still praying for an Earl to stand up for them." The crowd erupted. But Darren? He just smiled. Because now, he wasn't just a victim. He was a force. It had been nearly 2 years since the courtroom incident that changed everything. 2 years since a janitor's voice shattered an illusion of justice. And 2 years since Darren Holt rose from being a suspect to becoming a symbol. But even symbols get tested. Darren was sipping his coffee one rainy Tuesday morning when his phone buzzed. It was a young man named Khalil. His voice shook. "They took my brother, Mr. Holt. They said he ran from a stop sign. But he was home all night. He didn't do anything." Darren grabbed a notepad. "Where is he now?" "County. They charged him with resisting arrest and possession. But it's not true. He doesn't even smoke." Darren heard the panic in Khalil's breath. "I got you," he said. "We're going to fight this." That afternoon, Darren sat in the cramped visitor's room across from Khalil's brother, Jameer, 17 years old. Thin. Shaken. "They beat me," Jameer whispered. "Said if I moved again, they'd taste me. I wasn't even outside. They came into the yard." Darren's fists clenched under the table. Another one. Another innocent boy caught in a cycle. But this time, Darren was ready. He left the facility and made 3 calls. 1, his team's lawyer. 2, the oversight committee. 3, a journalist at the local paper. Then, he dug deeper. Body cam footage showed no resisting. No drugs were in the footage at all. In fact, one cop could be heard whispering, "Make something stick. This one looks like trouble." That was all Darren needed. He gathered the evidence, filed an emergency motion, and brought everything straight to the DA. "This isn't just a mistake," he said. "This is predatory. The DA sighed, reviewing the folder. You've built a solid case. It's not a case. It's a life, Darren replied. Within 48 hours, the charges were dropped. Jameer was released. And the officer in question? Suspended pending investigation. Outside the courthouse, Khalil and Jameer hugged Darren like he was family. I don't know how to thank you, Khalil said, eyes glossy. You just did, Darren said. Now help the next person who needs a voice. That moment reignited something in him. It wasn't enough to wait for injustice and then respond. It was time to go bigger. So, Darren launched a partnership with law schools across the state. He created an internship program for students to learn how to advocate for civil rights from the front lines. He even started leading workshops for police cadets. Mandatory sessions. At first, the room would go quiet when Darren walked in. Some rolled their eyes. Some scoffed. But he opened every session the same way. I'm not here to attack you. I'm here because one of your own nearly destroyed my life. And someone like you could have stopped it, but didn't. By the end of each session, hands would rise. Questions asked. And occasionally, someone would stay behind to shake his hand and say, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Word spread. Darren's work was featured on national platforms. CNN, MSNBC. He even sat across from Trevor Noah on The Daily Show, who called him a real-world superhero in sneakers. But through it all, Darren stayed grounded. He still lived in the same neighborhood. Still stopped by the corner store for his favorite ginger soda. Still played dominoes with the old heads outside the barbershop on Saturdays. Because he never wanted to forget where he came from. Because that place, the one the world tried to make him ashamed of, was sacred. Then came the award. The city announced its new Community Hero Honors. They were renaming the Community Justice Center after someone who embodied resilience and reform. They chose Darren Holt. The night of the ceremony, hundreds gathered. Friends, lawyers, activists, even the DA. But Darren only invited one person on stage with him. Earl, the janitor. Now in his 70s, wearing a pressed suit and teary eyes, Earl stood next to Darren as the mayor handed over the commemorative plaque. "This man saved my life with one sentence," Darren said. "He reminded me that courage doesn't always wear a badge or hold a mic. Sometimes it pushes a mop and just refuses to stay silent." The crowd stood, clapping, some crying. Earl tried to speak, but only managed. "I just knew it wasn't right." That night, Darren sat alone outside the center, the city buzzing behind him. He looked up at the stars and thought about the boy he used to be. The one afraid to walk too fast in certain neighborhoods. The one who kept his receipts in case someone thought he stole something. The one who believed no one would ever fight for him. And now, he was the fight. Not a savior. Not a politician. Just a man who survived the fire and came back with buckets of water for the rest. As the night wind swept over him, he smiled softly. Because somewhere out there, another kid like Jameer was getting a second chance. Another Earl was finding his voice. And another system, one step at a time, was being forced to look in the mirror. Darren stood up, looked at the glowing sign above the building. The Darren Holt Justice Center. Then whispered, "Let's keep going." Because his story wasn't a tragedy. It was a beginning.